This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
Your weekend is not complete without the First Lady of New York Radio. It's the Joan Hamburg Show. Talk Radio 77 WABC.
Let me tell you, I read a book that was really fascinating to me called The Algonquin Roundtable, 25 Years with the Legends Who Lunch. And it was edited by Mirana Comstock, and the author is listed as Konrad Bercovici. And the book is about a different time in our city and about a hotel that, as they say, is a home, not a hotel, but so much a part of the city that writers and musicians and actors love to go there. And when I had written one of my first books, I still remember how excited I was when the editor had me meet her at the Algonquin. It was part of New York history, and many of us had come of age marveling at the luminaries who lunched there and spent their time there. People like Dorothy Parker, Sinclair Lewis, movie stars, John Barrymore. It was quite a place. And Mirana, I'm curious, this was part of your family's history. Had you known all along, or how did you get involved in the book project?
Well, my grandfather passed away in 1961, and my whole family are writers and artists and musicians, and even the artists write. So there's a lot of manuscripts, and there's a lot of work that I, as the last kid of the last kid, inherited. And I was in the process of going through papers prior to selling my house, and there was 12 bins full of manuscripts, a lot of them my grandfather's. And while I was going through the work, I recognized that there were several books that had not been published. And he published 40 books in his lifetime, and literally hundreds of short stories and articles, because he was also a journalist for the New York Times, for The Nation, for the World, which was an incredible newspaper at the time. And so there was a lot of work, but I recognized when it was full book manuscripts that I did, because I had copies of all the books that were published. And an agent over at Writer's House actually pointed me in the direction of academia, because it's history of New York, because it was a book about the Algonquin Hotel and his time as a part of the Roundtable. And SUNY Excelsior editions are specifically about New York and New York history, and they were very, very interested right from the beginning. And as my discussions with them about it progressed, they asked me, because I'm a writer also, to do the editing and to write a foreword for the book. So I got it was pretty exciting, because it was keeping Grandpa alive.
Right. It was
and
your
I was sort of
family.
collaborating with him. And it was amazing stories. There's stories about Valentino, about Houdini practicing his things there. I mean, I Could Have Danced All Night was written there. The people were very, even if they had fancy houses and big studies and studios, at a certain point, they still wanted the luck of finishing that song or writing that final scene at the Algonquin in the suite that they usually were in.
Right.
So it definitely had a feeling of home to these people. And he had stories that other people hadn't told. And he's a very, because he's also a journalist, he very much puts you in the moment. It's like you're staying there. The book really has a feeling of you staying there for a couple of weeks and experiencing.
No, it does. And because of its location, there are tons of hotels there. It's in and around the theater district. Unless you really knew, you wouldn't understand that this hotel is definitely part of New York history, New York artistic history, literary.
Oh, it's amazing, and I kind of look at them as being the influencers of their day. You know, probably a lot more talented than the influencers of today, but they were, so many of them were also journalists. So what was going on there was very clearly going to get reported on, whether it was fashion or music or the film industry, which was just sort of starting to develop during the early years of that. And there's some interesting things with the recent strikes and so forth, that a lot of the unions for the actors and the writers were initially kind of formulated at the Algonquin, because that's where everybody was. So that's where they would be talking about it. So they were quite influential on many levels. And also, I think just a fun atmosphere. I mean, people could go there and nobody was going to make a huge fuss about their fame. They could go and have lunch with people and interact with people, and have a very enjoyable situation. But the names are just crazy when you read, like, Eleanor Roosevelt sitting in one place, and then Charles Lawton is practicing for some stage plays and, you know, on the floor above you, and it's just pretty phenomenal, because these are all, like, as you said, such luminaries of their time, that they would all be in one place together is just very exciting.
Right, and people would come to have lunch there if they could get a table, just to see who was seated there, and were they all together, and what role did they play in America's artistic scene, New York scene, and it was huge.
Oh, people, it was like the hiring hall. People would go to hire writers there, to hire actors there. It was almost like the place was a casting call on some levels. And you're just, the grandpa was in the middle. I remember when I was a kid, him going to lunch at the Algonquin. That's when I was a very young child. I remember him, like, going off, and he was always all happy to go there, to hang out with his
buddies, and he took you.
Yeah. And then my mom was a painter, and one of her paintings actually was exhibited in the lobby at one point back in the day. We had the launch for this book actually at the hotel, which was quite
fun
exciting.
For you.
Oh, it was a lot of fun. We had Kevin Fitzgerald, who's the head of the Dorothy Parker Society. He came and talked. He came and talked at the launch, because he really liked the book a lot, and he pointed something out, that there's not going to be another firsthand account of the Algonquin, because everybody's gone, and it's been gone for decades. So you're just, this is the last firsthand account that I just happened to find. And even if somebody else wrote something, would it be as well written? You know, it's probably not. You know, because Grandpa was an incredible writer. So it's been quite a journey finding. I mean, people have said that's a story in itself. The granddaughter finding the grandfather's book and finding the work.
You explain to the audience what happened to you? There were a lot of family papers, especially in a family like yours, where everyone wrote or composed, and everyone did something creative.
Yeah, and the visual artists also wrote. I mean, everybody wrote. I mean, when I was a kid, there was a certain point when I decided that the blue that you saw in your veins was because there was ink in them. There was ink in them. Unfortunately, I think I also shared that little story.
It's a
great
great
class.
Story, right?
but I firmly believe that, because that's the only thing that I was exposed to was people who were like that. It was like the family business was in the arts, and so when I was looking through this trunk and looking through all of these papers and trying to figure out what was what, it was very hard to tell if the stories were published or not, because he wrote hundreds of stories in every single magazine during a period of time where magazines were just part of the culture. so deeply part of the culture. He wrote for Esquire and Century and Harper's, and some of them do still exist, but he was up there on the mastheads along with Fitzgerald and Hemingway and Dreiser, all of whom he also wrote about. There's another book with that.
You just realized your business needed to hire someone yesterday. How can you find amazing candidates fast? Easy. Just use Indeed. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other job sites. With Indeed sponsored jobs, your post jumps to the top of the page for your relevant candidates, so you can reach the people you want faster. According to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed have 45% more applications than non-sponsored jobs. Don't wait any longer. Speed up your hiring right now with Indeed. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/ARTS. Just go to Indeed.com/ARTS right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring? Indeed is all you need.
Americans love using their credit cards, the most secure and hassle-free way to pay. But D.C. politicians want to change that with the Durbin-Marshall credit card bill. This bill lets corporate megastores pick how your credit card is processed, allowing them to use untested payment networks that jeopardize your data security and rewards. Corporate megastores will make more money, and you pay the price. Tell Congress to guard your card, because Americans lose when politicians choose. Learn more at guardyourcard.com.
Did they encourage you to write when you were growing up and coming of age?
I think it was natural for me.
You had to
write because I heard. I mean, I'm sure I was read incredible stories to go to sleep as a child, and I'm sure I just the kind of language I would hear around the dinner table would be very literate. But at the same time, I think in school, I actually didn't really go home and show what I wrote. I was a little in awe of the people around me, and there were occasions where I was accused of having other people write my work as a child. And at one point, they actually, in third grade, they put me in an office and closed the door and told me to go write something, and it was scared at first, thinking I was being punished. And then if the family story is that I saw like a plant across the courtyard, and there was a plant in the window in the office I was in, and I wrote a whole little piece about the plants communicating with each other across the courtyard. And they never asked me to prove myself.
They left you alone.
Sufficiently imaginative. Yeah, exactly. So
I know. And when you were a kid, did you appreciate the Charlie Chaplins and Hemingways? Did it mean something, or you were too little?
Yes. No. We used to go to the Modern Museum and look at. They have the screenings of the silent movies, and I remember going to those when I was a kid. So yeah. I mean, well, Grandpa wrote the original screenplay for The Great Dictator for Chaplin, and then Neisser was involved with representing him and going into court, and there was like a whole thing of.
It was there. Do you still go to lunch at the Algonquin?
No, I actually live in the Boston area, but it's funny because of having had the book launch at the Algonquin. A lot of people I knew came in for that, and they all now are staying there whenever they're in New York because they loved it. Because the people who are staying there in the first place are people who appreciate.
Right, who understand it. It's not a hotel. Yeah. It's just a hotel. It's
right, exactly. I mean, it's not the same, the things that have changed about it, but the launch we had was in the Oak Room, and the Oak Room was where one of the round tables was. So it was just kind of exciting to literally be in the footsteps of Grandpa. This is where he's at.
Yeah. No, it was great when I had written one of my early books and the agent took me to the Algonquin. It was the Russian tea room and the Algonquin. I absolutely was thrilled because who wouldn't want to go there? That was a big deal.
And he talks about that in the book about when the agent brought you there, and the agents who would be there discussing things, and you could tell how things were going by the tenor of the discussion that you could see going on at the table. So it was definitely very, very central to New York history. There's a little passage in the book about during World War II when they had like an air raid in the hotel, and everybody gathered in the lobby, and somebody got really concerned that if anybody did drop a bomb on the hotel, it would wipe out most of the literature and most of the theater and film actors of the country, because they were all pretty much there.
They were, and that was where you either went to meet friends and eat a meal or get a meal, and the maitre d', and those people played a large part in people's lives.
Oh, yeah, and the nice thing is the book has a little bit of an upstairs downstairs feeling like that. It really does get into the waiters and the managers and the head valet who presses people's suits and gets asked for Valentino's ties and things like that.
And Mirana, what was the feeling towards the book from all those cast of characters who played such a large part in making this hotel part of history?
Well, they're not around to know what's in this book, but I think he treats them quite nicely and quite lovingly. I don't think he's not lambasting anybody.
No.
Though I don't think he was that crazy about Valentino. He sort of had some iffy stuff, but he says there's something about him that obviously women responded to that men couldn't understand.
Right, even though he wasn't. I was surprised because I don't remember how he looked until I read again in your book. But he apparently was not movie star looks. You didn't swoon unless you really understood who he was.
You'd been trained to swoon,
Right,
and possibly in some cases paid to swoon,
Yeah. No, and
the Beatles of his time. Yeah.
Exactly, and then people who would go to the round table to be part of it. Some of them, if the house didn't go crazy when they walked in, would say, "What's wrong? What happened?"
Right. Because they were used to it. I mean, they would complain about it, but they still missed it. Yeah.
Of course. And I wonder, that hotel like that, the Russian Tea Room, Michael's is a whole different thing. The celebrity world has changed. Have you noticed from your grandfathers and your coming of age kind of celebrity to what's going on now?
Yeah, well, of course, obviously online and all that kind of stuff, and everybody with a cell phone to take a picture or a selfie and to make themselves into a celebrity. It's sort of we're all celebrities now.
Why not?
And the reasons for being a celebrity in terms of work. I don't know how much work that's being produced now is really going to be looked at 50 years from now the same way this work is. I'm not sure, or if it's even supposed to. It's more disposable.
Right, but the figures who hung out there were major personalities of that time and continuing. I mean, Ernest Hemingway, Charlie Chaplin, people like that. They were part of the culture, the history, and the literary life of New York City.
Well, we're still talking about them, and I don't know how many people with, celebrities today people will still be talking about, or not. I'm not sure.
Different because we have so much more than we have plays on Broadway, off Broadway, downtown, uptown, everywhere. We have a lot of stuff.
But a lot of it is recycling, too. A lot of it is based on a television series or based on a movie or it's just trying to get the boomers in, I think. Or it's a jukebox musical. It's songs from when you were a teenager. There's original. I'm not as involved with the theater. I'm not in New York and stuff like that. I'm just not as involved with it, but as I am with like film. But I feel there's a lot of recycling without without as much original thinking, which is too bad.
And when you first started going to the Algonquin or back to the Algonquin, even as an adult or a young adult, was it what you thought it was, or had it changed so much?
Well, it's changed. It's landmarked, so some of it can't change, but things change for the time, and they're a business. I think there's an effort to look to their past. They understand that it's important. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they were very, very nice to us doing the book launch there. Everybody was great, and I think there's a level of service there and stuff that's nice, because I think the people who go there expect that.
Right. They understood that it's not just a hotel. It's got to be treated in a different way. And people still love to go to lunch there or hang out there because it is so much a part of Manhattan.
Yeah, there are still tours that take off from the Algonquin and go to the places and the people connected with it and stuff, because it's pretty amazing how many people went through those doors and how important they were to culture and who we're still talking about, which is kind of amazing. But I mean, that's also not the only unpublished work I found in there too. There's a novel that we're talking about turning into a miniseries, and there's another book which has some of the memoir stories in another book that I found, I think, were published at the time, but not all. I mean, there's stories about this book called Up Close and Personal is the stories about Chaplin and Hemingway, because Grandpa brought Hemingway to his publisher, because Grandpa was better known actually at that period of time, and Dreiser and Fitzgerald. I think Zelda had a thing for Grandpa. Grandpa was quite magnetic, quite intense, great looking guy actually, and so that we're pursuing that too. And in the pursuit of getting that together, I found stories about Mahler, and it was like when Mahler was a conductor before he was known as a composer. I think part of the reason Grandpa had access to some of these people was because as a journalist, he would potentially be interviewing them, and then he was just sufficiently likable and brilliant and great to talk to. They became friends with him. Yeah. All
right, so you must have had such a good time doing this, putting it together.
I did. I was a little. There were moments of like, am I worthy of editing? I'm used to editing my own writing, but I'm not used to editing somebody else's writing. And there wasn't a huge amount of editing that had to be done, because Grandpa has a very modern style from being a journalist that puts you in the moment. But there were also times that I would say, well, if Grandpa was writing this today, would he really make that one sentence, or would he make it two sentences? So I had to sit and put the Grandpa hat on and respect his style and not turn his style into my style. Yeah. But at the same time, think how he would do it today. And that was a little hard. It's not my profession. They're editor. I mean, back in that day, you would have, and probably still today, you have somebody who is your editor, who knows your style and knows how to like make changes within your style. But that's not what I do. So this was, I was very conscious of not wanting to step on what made it him,
what had
and
come.
At the same time, knowing it's 70 years since he wrote it, and would he have changed? There was surprisingly small amount to change. It was just every once in a while I would say, okay, that sentence is a little long. Sorry, Grandpa.
Well, it's okay. Well, the Algonquin Roundtable is still home to people who write plays, people who act, a lot of actors, a lot of writers, magazine editors. As I said, that was when I had sold one of my books. She wanted to go to the Algonquin. I was thrilled. So it's
exciting.
Right, it's still there and still exciting and still means you've made your mark. And it's a fun place to have lunch and see who's around. You did a good job. Congratulations, Mirana.
And congratulations, Grandpa.
Yeah, Grandpa. And the book is called The Algonquin Roundtable, 25 Years with the Legends Who Lunch. Take care. I look forward to talking to you again. I'm Joan Hamburg, and you're listening to WABC.